Why are there so many people talking about business that don't seem to have the context of like the end in mind? They're not talking about like, hey, how do I sell my $1 million a year business for like 4, 5, 6 million bucks? You would just be able to post a job, and then your job was to sort through applicants who had a massive tolerance for inconvenience, and then you would choose the best one. And that doesn't work anymore.
Anybody willing to confront anybody? No, because they're sure that the boss isn't going to accept it.
He just got his ass kicked by the buyers of his business. Now he's going to go turn to the plant medicine to give him some perspective. So we've spent the last 4 episodes talking about transferable value. We've laid out some frameworks for kind of assessing transferable value, for like thinking about transferable value. But Dad, you've advised billions of dollars in business value. You've spent 40 years hanging out with different coaching groups and play things like EO and Bloom Growth and all these different systems. I've dabbled a little bit in them. My opening question on this is, how common are conversations about like what actually is transferable value? How do I assess how valuable my business is?
Well, transferable value would be the value that you've created that isn't reliant on you, Alex. So to the extent that you're responsible for delivering business results directly through your relationships or through your leadership, meaning, directing activity, that value is not transferable to a buyer. Then the buyer would have to assume that responsibility, or they would be concerned that the value that is reliant on you is not transferable to them, and they're going to force you to stick around and deliver it for them.
So, okay, so this is what I hear in this is that there might be an implied misperception that like people think about their business value and they might have one number in their head, or owners might have one number in their head about what their business is worth, but they're not considering how the owner who would want to exit the business is impacting that value. So maybe perceived business value and transferable value are not always the same.
Yes. You'll hear people reference 4 times EBITDA or 5 or 6 times EBITDA as a valuation method, but then you subject that business to due diligence by some third party, which is usually a buyer, and they're assessing how much of that earnings can be transferred to them without the owner sticking around.
And how often, in your experience, how often are people right about or how often does their assumption about their business value and what actually happens when the microscope comes, or the buyer comes in with a microscope?
That question depends on how much work the business has done in advance of this inspection. So we just priced a business. It was in the home care services, and we suggested that the high range of value was 7 times trailing 12 months EBITDA, which is, adjusted profit. We went out to the market, solicited buyers. We had at least one buyer come back and agree with us that it was 7 times that. Why was it 7 times? Because the owner was playing the role of chairman of the board, and he had a team of people that were responsible for delivering the service that the customers were happy to pay for. And so they were willing to pay him nearly all of the value of that 7 times. 6 of that 7, 6 times earnings was going to be paid in cash. And the 1 times earnings was going to be paid in the next 2 years.
Okay. So I'm just gonna get a train of thought going here, which is just like, people don't talk about this. And I think you're trying to introduce this conversation and it's not, and you're seeing that like owners and leaders of these coaching organizations want to be talking about this, but they're not sure. They don't really have a lot of resources around it. I'm going to throw like a bit of shade at some of the programs that I've been a part of, where they're talking about, they start with talking about, principles that can be learned from billion-dollar oil barons, from the Industrial Revolution. And they're not talking about like, hey, how do I sell my $1 million a year business for like $4, $5, $6 million bucks? And those seem to be radically different conversations. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't see a lot of material about that. So can we just dig into like what's actually going on there? Like why are there so many people talking about business that don't seem to have the context of like the end in mind?
Well, there's a lot of information available for these high profile, successful, multi-generational businesses that same information isn't available to publish on the small to medium-sized business that is doing $1 million worth of earnings. No one's compiling data on what they did to get ready. There is no central repository for the preparation that owner might have engaged in with outside advisors, a coach, an M&A firm. But anecdotally, if you were to interview M&A advisors, they would all say, yeah, we love it when a business is set up so that the owner is not the value driver, because we know then that's going to be the most cash that the buyers or what buyer would be willing to pay as a percentage of the total purchase price. But it's all anecdotal now. There's no one's formalizing it in the way of any data points, or they're not writing.
You've got most of the successful small businesses in the United States would probably fit into that category. I would think of either somewhere in the hundreds of thousands to low millions of dollars in EBITDA. I guess let me just test that assumption. Is that true?
Yeah.
In terms of the most successful small businesses that are kind of fit into that range, not into the 10 million, 100 million categories.
Yeah,
like super successful businesses.
The distribution of size is heavily weighted towards the small and medium-sized business. If you look at the number of businesses out there, and the top 500 companies in the United States represent the lion's share of the total revenue because of just the sheer mass of the revenue that they're able to generate with their brand and their reach. So yeah, I would agree that small and medium-sized business is not clearly understood because perhaps the data isn't there, or it isn't easily retrievable.
So you've built your framework for assessing transferable value, just not from like publicly available data, not from university research studies. It's just anecdotal. This is the culmination of 4 decades of observation. I guess I'd ask, like, how do you, if you're advising a coach that's stepping into a business, a conversation with an owner about transferable value, give them like, what's your framework? How do you think about it when you walk into one of those conversations?
My experience has shown me that the most important aspect of the transferability of the business value is the people that are playing the senior roles in the organization. And would a buyer, if they were sitting with those people, get a sense of confidence and observe competence, which is what would create the confidence in the people that are playing those senior leadership roles? That's where I see the due diligence, if you use that term as a way of describing what a buyer does in order for them to affirm that the value that that you're saying you've created is actually there. It starts off with the people.
Okay. So just give me the framework. Just give me the framework.
There are three aspects of what I see as being like high level. What would I do as a coach when I was doing coaching businesses was three things: people, risk, and opportunity. And on the people side, I was looking primarily at, would I feel as a buyer that the leadership team is capable of running the business independent of the owner? And that's a set of observations and proof points from the parties that you would be interviewing, which would be the leadership team. And know that ideally the leadership team would be interviewed by the buyer. And then along the way, if the coach is observing the leadership team in action, they could be assessing, are these people capable of inspiring performance from the team, which would mean that scorecard is green, rocks are achieved, goals are met. Are they able to attract the talent needed? They don't have chronically open positions or dealing with lackluster performance because they can't find anybody to replace the person that's performing, below average. And are they able to develop the talent when they find people that have good attitudes but maybe low skills? Can they come up with ways to build those people up so they can play a bigger role? So that would be the people side for the coaching is, does that leader inspire confidence? Can they make the team better? And are they able to attract people to join the organization? And that attracting people in the organization, Alex, from my perspective, is probably the least understood responsibility of senior leaders. I guess I would ask for your experience there.
Yeah, I view this as a massive risk, especially as labor, the dynamic of demographic trends continue, whether or not we just can't overcome the fact that there aren't enough people to do the jobs. And so the ability to compete for those people and then also compete for not everybody's equal, let's say, in terms of their potential performance. So yeah, it's a huge blind spot. And I see it written on senior leaders, job descriptions commonly. It's like recruit employees for your team as a job description. Well, that statement is evidence to me of leadership that doesn't understand what goes into recruiting, because the reality is that why? Because you can't do that job. You can't do this key employee job and be out doing the work necessary to recruit in 2025. Like it's just, or 2026 we're coming up on. It's just too much work. So yeah, so it's a big risk, big risk. I still don't think people they're not talking about it. Like you go on, we did research on YouTube as we started our YouTube channel, we were looking at like recruiting videos, and there's maybe like how to recruit. All the answers are like all the results that come up for like how to recruit are for video games, like how to recruit for your NCAA college football team, like that's what's available. So it's a really unknown space, and it's understandable because it's new. It used to be the case that you would just be able to post a job, and then your job was to sort through applicants who had a massive tolerance for inconvenience and for poor experience. And then you would choose the best one. And that doesn't work anymore. We'll talk more about that later, but I do agree that like this, when it comes to the people, that's a big blind spot.
Well, that's a great segue into the second category of assessment that a coach, when I was coaching, that I would perform of businesses, is there risk of these key people who are in these very important planning meetings. Are they engaged, or do they look like they're getting ready for their next position somewhere else? Do they feel like the team is being held to a high standard? Like the biggest risk I see in closely held small business is the owner basically protecting people that are really legacies and that they're not capable of functioning at this new level. The organization may have grown beyond them, and they've brought on people that are capable of supporting that growth. But then there's always one or two people on the team that, man, they just aren't able to elevate or to level up, as they say now, to that new game, to that new level of competition. So risk of leadership team defection sometimes, from my experience, starts with what the owner is accepting in the way of compromising performance. And the other person just feels like, well, why should I be more motivated to push harder than this person? And then that suggests then that any incentives that are tied to future performance have way lower commitment to the outcome because they don't feel that the team is going to be capable of achieving the target, which then presents a defection risk if somebody else comes along with a better plan, more confidence on the part of the key employee. If I go there, my talents won't be wasted, and they're willing to pay me this new incentive reward that's part of business value creation. So that's like,
okay, let me
to me, like the number one risk.
Let's dive into that though, because I feel like that's super common, right? Like the avoidance is the number one saboteur of anybody that we assess in our team. We do this this assessment to get an idea of like, how are people sabotaging their own success? And avoidance is almost always the number one thing. It's definitely usually top three. And it seems to be common. We know it's common with business owners. Like we know in our family businesses that we've been a part of or are a part of, that avoidance is there. I deal with avoidance every day. I do not want to make, certain calls. And now we're talking about people that maybe have been avoiding a conversation, a really tough conversation for 5 years, for 10 years. And they think they've kind of just have they gotten blind to it? Like, are they going in, are the owners coming in when you talk to them and for context for people, you'll come in and you'll do an interview series with the leadership team, right? And
yes,
that's probably where you uncover this like, hey, why is this guy here? Well, he was there when, earlier in
the brother of the owner.
Reward loyalty. Okay, he's just nepotism. So blood bond is the justification for the job. Is the owner aware that this is actually a threat to the business, just at any level?
I would say they're not aware of what the implications of that compromise has on the commitment of the other members of the team. That they assume that everything is, well, basically, if the company's profitable, then they're more likely to assume that it's okay. If profits slip or performance, let me restate that. Normally what happens is they hire a coach because they want something to happen. And that happen that they want to see is growing the business value. And then they come up with these initiatives, and the initiatives aren't necessarily achieved fully, 60, 50, 60, 70%. And they're like, why isn't this working? Why everybody agreed they were going to do this? Well, the people who are capable of performing probably are holding back a little bit because they don't want to end up having to do everything that the other person's not capable of doing. That's what I see is they go, I'm not getting paid to do that guy's job or perform those key roles for them. And when they do that, resentment builds up. And then you have disharmony in the leadership team that is really quiet. It takes a lot for that resentment to get expressed in a meeting with other individuals because they're not sure how the owner is going to respond to that. Like you watch these cabinet meetings now of our executive office in Washington, and is anybody willing to deliver any bad news? Anybody willing to confront anybody? No, because they're sure that the boss isn't going to accept it.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's just like the owner has created this environment where this problem exists, and they're not aware of how they think, oh, yeah, Bob's not probably the right guy, but things are good and are good enough, and blah blah blah. But you're saying is subtle, but it's not invisible. It's not the murmurs will be heard by the investigating buyers. Pretty.
Yeah.
Does anybody ever get away with this kind of stuff? To just sneak through?
Well, the situation of the leadership team being interviewed by the buyer is usually an amateur playing one-on-one with a pro. The amateur is the key employee who has never been through a business sale, and now they're sitting, knee to knee with a buyer who's probably a pro. If they're private equity, they're definitely experienced at evaluating these people, and they're looking for conflict. Conflict allows the buyer to do what they call retrade, which is adjust the payment terms or the purchase price of the business based upon risks they perceive to exist in that leadership team. And that's not the time an owner wants to learn.
No,
But-
it's too late, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's too late.
yeah, so I'm thinking about this like this is almost like the PE or the buyer is going to release their truffle pig to go sniff out any possible prize, which and this is kind of an adversarial deal, right? Like there is the buyer's incentive is to drive down the purchase price, right? To increase the value of the buy. And
let's say the buyer is seeking to create conditions that would suggest that the value is not completely transferable. It's there because the owner is able to accommodate the dysfunction.
Sure. I mean, I think I agree with that, but I think it's just at its core, it's kind of like I'm thinking about these. In my mind, the archetype would be the really charming villain that comes into town, and then everybody really starts to like and gets buy-in from everybody, and then he gets to doing what he was really there to do, which was to extract resources or whatever. And so I got to believe that can be a bit of a surprise for people that. Well, if you're not communicating about these kinds of issues, you're not communicating in a way that's preparing you for having that guy come into town. I'm thinking about There Will Be Blood and the scenes with
Daniel Day-Lewis,
like go in the church and Daniel Day-Lewis. Thank you. Yeah, getting buy-in from the people to dig this well. And he brought his son in, and it's all, and then in the end, what does he do? He beats the preacher to death with a bowling bit.
Daniel,
yeah.
beats him with a bowling.
So, yeah, it was a pretty great scene. So, all right. Well, we're probably a little bit over invested into people risk. We need to cover opportunities. So let's go to the bright side. I mean, I love the dark side of this stuff, but, let's talk about opportunity.
This tends to be the place most commonly occupied by advisors. They're usually more interested in talking about improvements to performance. Like when I was coaching McGill Restoration, for example, I was a client, and one of the things we did early on was come up with a way to improve the handoff from the project in the office, which is, where they do the pre-construction and the estimating, and then they scope and schedule the project and takeoffs and all that. And then they hand it off to the field. And so we literally went through and created a wheel of activity that led up to the handoff and what needed to happen at each point in that wheel in order for that handoff to be smooth and that wheel to continue to turn. And that was a lot of fun to do because everybody was problem solving and excited about the possibilities of this improvement becoming reality. So that innovation, and improvements is really key. Like, are we doing things is there any way for us to improve the way we do the most common aspects of our business, the delivery of our service or our product? That innovation, that willingness to innovate and assess is fun. That's what I found to be fun. And then if you're really good at something, like in McGill's case as an example, they felt that their tradesmen were really the special secret sauce they had in the market. They received work because their tradesmen were so skilled. So it was like, all right, well, how do we exploit that? How do we feature, the tradesmen and the craftsmanship of these tradesmen? So much so that their tagline or their brand is, building relationships through craftsmanship. So they're really leaning into what they saw as being their unique ability, what made them the obvious choice for anybody looking for masonry restoration. And then thirdly, in the same case with Tim, very much focused on technology, so much so that he had created a technology platform that allowed them to control the pre-construction, the project management for all their projects. So they could see where every project was. And this was before, off-the-shelf software was available. So that willingness to invest in technology. So the opportunity assessment from my perspective as a coach was, what should we be leaning into that we're known for? What do we need to do to make our wheel of business turn smoother? And is there any way that we can get better data, make faster decisions, predict, problems if there are going to be any by using technology? Those would be the three areas of opportunity when I was coaching that I paid attention to.
So let me connect some dots there then. I would imagine that the most valuable version of that opportunity would be a organization culture that is driving those kind of innovations and those kinds of leaps forward, and not having them be so, like, it's good to have a leadership team engaged with a coach that's doing that. That's good enough. The great version of that is that like organic, self-generated culture of continuous improvement.
My experience is that either the owner and maybe the right or left-hand person, their top people are pushing that level of innovation. Then someone down in let's say where the stuff is happening, where the work is being done, buys into it and decides they're going to run with it. And they're going to be the example of the adoption, getting people to buy into the change, because all of these things I've said tend to be changes that are being made to activities. And, change is challenging for people, especially if they weren't involved in the creation of the change outcome. They're blind to what it was that went into the discussion, and all they see is the aftermath. And that's kind of disrupting to them. So you got to find somebody down in the organization who will be your champion. Go into the ring with the sword and the shield and fight off all the naysayers.
Yeah, I think this is a good, like, generational divide. I think that this is going to be like one of these themes that we're going to explore. I see this so differently than the way that you see it. And what we do in Percivis is, like, every day we have a short 45 minutes all hands meeting, that a third of which is just general issue processing. And we took this from there's a lean thing that we took from a client of ours, and it was like, oh, this is genius. And we had an example today of we're onboarding a new graphic designer, and she brought up that she didn't feel like we were organized in a way that supported her. She needed a place to store the resources that she was building, and she needed a place to kind of track her work. Where was she going to be doing her project management? And then, what happens is like the two video editors jump in with understanding the problem and then offering solutions. And our project manager steps in and says, hey, here's how we're going to roll this project out. And I'm going to take that off your hands. That took 10 minutes. And I think in the organizations that we serve, the you and I serve, that's like, okay, we're going to have a meeting. I need to get with my boss to schedule a meeting about this problem that I'm having. And in the meantime, I'm going to be operating at like 10% productivity while I wait for resolution on this project. So anyway, I think this is going to be, that's rich. We're going to like going back to Daniel Day-Lewis. And by the way, it was Daniel Plainview. That was not Plainview. That was a great name for a small town preacher. But
yeah.
Or was it? Wait, was that Daniel Day-Lewis's character's name? I'm terrible with this stuff. You're usually got the memory for that stuff.
I think the other actor, his name was Paul Dano. That's it. Paul Dano was the priest. Okay. And his name could have been
a combination of Plano.
Somebody's name could be Plainview. It was in Texas. So either A, it was in Plainview, Texas, or somebody's name was Plainview.
We'll include the solution to that puzzle in the show notes. So, all right. Well, I definitely think that's a rich topic. I want to get into that because I think like there is something really to this, that like your characterization of it is we need a hero to go do battle on this. And mine is we just need to talk and then do it quickly. And then we can just resolve these issues naturally. So, or not naturally, but just with like way less friction. So, it'll be fun to tease that out, but we're about a half an hour deep on our episode today. So we've introduced your pro framework. I love that. So it's easy to remember: people, risks, opportunities. There's some sub questions in that. You've put together, a resource for coaches that we'll have in the show notes. It'll be probably a simple PDF, and then we'll, iterate on that as, Laura, our new graphic designer, gets onboarded and starts making our resources for us. So, if you made it to this section of the podcast, thank you for participating. Let us know in the comments, like, what was there anything that was interesting? Maybe who is Daniel Day-Lewis's character's name in that, and There Will Be Blood. And then, let's look at, you can also find us, at the McFarlandMethod.com or McFarlandMethod.com, and then the McFarland Method coaching community on LinkedIn. So that's growing. Yvonne's out there talking to to coaches every day, and we're getting more and more data about the coaching community. And I want to actually touch on this. You mentioned that there's not data, right? We know that there's one guy that has data. Was it the labor efficiency ratio? What's his name?
Oh, yes.
Help me out, Crabtree. Greg Crabtree. Yeah. So Greg has his list of his small business data, which all kind of fits into the profile that we were talking about of 6-7 figure EBITDA businesses, and what does that look like? I think he's got some interesting reports that he shares on that. He would be,
yes.
He would be, but that's not publicly available data. That's Greg's data. And I think the same thing that we're trying to do with the coaches is a similar thing, to be able to get that qualitative research done to understand what's going on in the coaching community. So appreciate Ivan leading that charge on that project. So, let's go ahead and make the transition over to our coaches only segment. And our story today involves business failure, hospitalization, ayahuasca retreat, then 5-year, 7-figure exit, 8-figure exit. This is going to be a really interesting story. I'm looking forward to you sharing in the coaches section.